What would you change if your future self warned you today? An original audiobook by Mindshift Library. The apartment was quiet in the way only 14 in the morning can be quiet, not silent exactly, but stripped of everything that usually explains a room to itself. The refrigerator ticked. Somewhere 2 floors down a pipe made its old complaining sound. Elias Brandt sat at the small desk in the corner of the living room, a mug of cold coffee in front of him, and did not know why he was awake. He had stopped knowing why he was awake about 3 years ago. The insomnia had arrived the same month his father died, the same month Halcyon Post had promoted him to senior editor, the same month Wren started school and began, slowly, to need him less. Coincidence, he told himself. Coincidences were safer than patterns. On the desk, under the lamp, lay an envelope he did not remember bringing home. It was cream-colored and thick, the kind of paper you only ever see in wedding invitations or death notices. The flap was not glued. It was tucked, as if someone had sealed it in a hurry and trusted the weight of the paper to hold. Across the front, in a hand he almost recognized, were the words. To Elias Brandt. Open only when you cannot sleep. He turned it over, on the back in the same ink. It is 1:14, you are awake, I told you so. A cold thread ran from his neck to his wrists. He had not told anyone he was awake. Naomi was asleep in the bedroom with the door cracked, and Wren was a small breathing shape under her astronaut sheets, and the only person who knew he was awake at 1:14 was the man sitting at the desk, and the man who had written those words. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet, folded once, and a second sheet behind it he would not find until much later. The first sheet said, at the top. The lamp on the desk was the kind with the articulated arm his father had given him when he moved into his first apartment. Asterisk, so you can see what you're avoiding, Robert had said, and Elias had laughed, and had spent the next 16 years using it mostly to read email. He angled it now onto the cream paper, and the light caught the fibers the way light catches a face you have not looked at in years. He realized he was holding his breath, and let it go, and the sound of it in the quiet room was embarrassingly loud, the sound of a man who had been found out by an envelope. A letter from your future self. I am you, Elias. I am writing this on a Tuesday, 20 years from the night you are reading it. I know how that sounds. I also know the scar on your left knee, the one from the bicycle accident when you were 11, the one you tell people was a dog bite. I know the promise you made to Dad on his last clear afternoon, that you would keep the family together. You didn't, not really. But you still can. Before you decide this is a prank, wait for Wednesday at 4:12 in the afternoon. The barista at the corner shop, the one with the green apron, the one you pretend not to notice, will hand you the wrong cup and say, "This one's on me, you look like you need it." She will be holding your exact drink, which you never ordered out loud. When that happens, read the rest. You still have time to become the man I failed to become. He read it 3 times. Then he read the scar line 4 more times because no one knew about the bicycle. He had told Naomi it was a dog. He had told Wren it was a dog. He had told himself it was a dog for so long that the dog had, in some quiet part of him, become true. The bicycle had been a red one, second-hand, with a bell that did not work, and he had been 11 and invincible and had taken the hill on Cedar Street faster than a boy on a bad break should. The scar was a pale comma on his knee, the shape of a comma, the shape of a sentence that had been interrupted. He had told Naomi on their 3rd date that a dog had done it. She had laughed and said what kind of dog, and he had said a terrier, a mean one, and she had smiled and filed it under Elias tells small stories about himself, which was, he saw now, the most accurate file she had ever made. The letter had not said *a terrier. It had said the bicycle accident when you were 11, the one you tell people was a dog bite. It knew the lie. It knew the dog. It knew the comma-shaped scar. The only person alive who knew all 3 was the boy who had fallen, and the boy who had fallen was him, and the boy who had fallen was also, apparently, the man writing from 20 years on. Elias put the letter down. His hands were steady, which disturbed him more than shaking would have. Wednesday came, and with it the small gray weather of a man who does not believe in signs. Elias went through the day the way he went through most days, on rails he had laid a long time ago and no longer questioned. Coffee at the corner shop. The walk to Halcyon Post. 11 floors of editing other people's sentences into sentences that would sell. Lunch at his desk. The walk back. Dinner he barely tasted. The particular exhaustion of a life that is going well enough that no one, including him, thinks to ask if it is going anywhere. He had almost forgotten the envelope by 400. He had decided sensibly that it was a prank, some intern's idea of a joke, or a marketing stunt for a book he would be asked to acquire. The scar detail was unsettling, but the mind plays tricks. He had probably mentioned the dog story to someone who had quietly filed it away. People remembered things. That was ordinary. That was safe. At 4:11, he stepped into the corner shop. The place was busy, the kind of busy that makes you invisible. He ordered his usual, a flat white, no sugar, extra hot, and turned to wait by the pickup counter, already reaching for his phone, already retreating into the blue light of things that did not matter. At 4:12, the barista with the green apron slid a cup across the counter. She was maybe 23, with the calm of someone who had decided not to be hurried by other people's urgency. "This one's on me," she said. "You look like you need it." Elias blinked. "I haven't paid." "You don't have to." She smiled, the small professional smile of a person who has decided to be kind without making it a performance. "It's your exact drink. I made it before you ordered. I don't know why, I just knew." He stood there holding the cup, and the thread from the night before went cold again, only this time it ran all the way to his stomach. He had not said the words out loud. He never did. He ordered on the app every time and collected without speaking. No one at the shop knew his drink. No one could have predicted 4:12 because he had nearly gone to the office cafe instead. He had only come here because the app had crashed. He looked down at the cup. On the lid, in a hand that was not the barista's, were the words, "Now read the rest. You." He turned the cup in his hands the way you turn a relic. The lid was plain white, the kind that comes from a stack, not printed. The ink was blue. His blue, the blue of the pen he kept in the desk drawer, the one Naomi had given him with for the novel you'll write on the card, the one he had not opened in 4 years. He had not brought that pen to the shop. He had not brought any pen. The writing on the lid was dry, as if it had been there for hours, or for years, or for the exact amount of time a message needs to wait for the person meant to receive it. He walked out without his receipt. He walked home without his usual stop at the newsstand. He walked past Naomi, who was setting the table, and said something about a headache, and went to the desk and opened the second sheet of the letter. The second sheet was longer. It did not explain how. It assumed he would now believe, and it moved, with the terrible efficiency of a person who has waited 20 years for this conversation, straight to the point. "2 more things will happen, and you will know then that I am real. The second, on Friday, Ren will come home from school with a drawing she will not show you. She will say it is for Mama. It will be a picture of the 3 of us, but in it I am not holding her hand. I am looking at my phone. Ask her about it. Not because the drawing is a prophecy, because she is already noticing the thing the drawing shows. You have time to be in the picture before she stops drawing you into it at all. The third is the one that matters, and I will not write it here. You are not ready, and readiness is part of the test. But it is this. In 9 days you will be offered the thing you have told yourself you wanted since you were 22. Take it, and you will become me. Refuse it, and you might still become the other one. I am writing because I took it. I am writing because I was wrong. You still have time to become the man I failed to become." Elias read it sitting down, then read it standing, then read it once more with the door closed. Outside, Naomi knocked and asked if he was all right, and he said yes, and she did not believe him, and he did not blame her. He looked at the cup in his hand. The coffee was still too hot to drink. On the lid, the words had not changed. He had told no one about the scar. He had told no one he came here at 4:12, and the barista had known both. He did not sleep Wednesday night either, but now it was a different kind of wakefulness. Before, it had been the numb static of a man avoiding his own life. Now it was the bright, dangerous alertness of a man who had been handed a thread and could feel it leading somewhere he was afraid to follow. The old insomnia had been a wall, a thing between him and the dark, built of unexamined days. This new wakefulness was a window. Through it he could see the shape of the life he had been calling fine. Fine, he now understood, was the word you used for a building when you were afraid to check the foundation. The letter had not so much given him information as removed a wall he had built himself, and the view through the opening was not the future. It was the present, which was worse and better. He made a pot of tea he did not drink and sat by the window until the sky went from black to the color of old coins. The city woke the way it always did, indifferent to the rearrangement of one man, and he watched the first bus and the first runner and the first dog walker, and felt a strange tenderness for all of them, the tenderness of a person who has just been told he is still alive and is surprised to find he is glad. The letter had not promised him anything. It had only shown him the clock was still running, which, he was beginning to understand, is the only promise anyone ever needs. By Thursday, he had a theory, and the theory was that the letter was real, and the theory terrified him more than the alternative. He tested it the only way he knew how. He went looking for seams. If someone had forged this, the forgery would have a source. He photographed the envelope under the desk lamp, the paper, the ink, cream stock, no watermark he could see. The handwriting was his or close enough that his own hand could not tell the difference. He wrote his name 10 times on a spare sheet and held the samples side by side. The muscle memory was there. The shapes were his. But the pressure, the confidence, the slightly forward lean of the letters, that was an older hand. A steadier hand. A hand that had stopped being in a hurry. He searched the apartment for anything that might explain it. A hidden recorder. A second phone. A sender. He found nothing, which was somehow worse than finding a prank. He checked the vents, the baseboards, the back of the desk where a child might tape a joke. He checked his own phone, in case he had dictated something in the half-sleep and forgotten. He checked Naomi's search history, which he had no right to do and which he closed the moment it opened, ashamed, because the violation would have been its own kind of leaving. He found nothing. The apartment was clean of senders. Which meant the sender was either very good or not in the apartment at all, or, and this was the thought he kept circling, inside him, which is the one place a search never finds what it is looking for because it is looking with the thing it seeks. Naomi noticed. Of course she noticed. She had been noticing him for 16 years, and she had a geologist's eye for the shifts in the man she married. "You've been somewhere else since Tuesday," she said over dishes that night. Wren was in the bath, singing a song with all the words wrong. "Is it halcyon?" did Priestley finally. "No," Elias said, "it's not work." She waited. Naomi was good at waiting. It was one of the things he loved about her, and one of the things he resented, because waiting gave him room to lie, and he did not want to lie to her, and he also could not yet tell her the truth, because the truth was a letter from himself in 20 years, and she would reasonably ask him to make an appointment with someone. "I got a thing in the mail," he said finally. "A letter, it's strange. I think it might be a prank, but it knew something it shouldn't." "Knew what?" He opened his mouth to say the scar and closed it. "Just a private thing. I'll tell you, I want to be sure first." The thing was, he was not protecting her from a prank. He was protecting himself from the look on her face when he said *A letter from me wrote that I still have time to become the man I failed to become, because that sentence was not about the letter. It was about the life. It was about the 1,000 small leavings, the school play he had watched from his phone, the anniversary dinner he had taken on a call, the way Wren had stopped asking him to read because he always said soon. The letter had not invented those. It had only named them, the way a diagnosis names a pain you have been calling tiredness. She nodded, and he saw her file it away under Elias, withdrawing again, and he hated that the file already existed, and he hated more that it was, in its way, accurate. That night he wrote the barista a message through the app, "Did someone leave instructions for my order today?" and deleted it before sending. He was not ready to know the answer, or he was afraid to know it. The letter said the second prediction would land on Friday. He had one day to decide whether to watch for it or to talk himself out of watching. He did not decide. He simply found himself, Friday afternoon, noticing Wren's backpack the way a detective notices a clue. Wren came home from school at 3:40, all knees and backpack, and the particular gravity of a 7-year-old who has decided something is important. She went straight to Naomi and presented a folded sheet of paper with the ceremony of a diplomat delivering a treaty. "For you, Mama," she said. Naomi opened it. Elias was at the counter, pretending to slice an apple he did not want, and he watched his wife's face change, Not much. Naomi did not change much in public, but a small softening, the kind that meant the drawing had landed somewhere true. "Come look," Naomi said, and held it up. It was the three of them, Naomi in the middle, recognizable by her hair and the way she smiled with her whole face. Ren on the right, holding Naomi's hand, drawn with the ferocious care of a child who loves the person she is drawing, and Elias on the left. He was looking at his phone. Not in a mean way. Just his stick figure eyes were on the rectangle in his hand, and his other hand dangled at his side, empty, not holding anyone. "She got your hair exactly wrong," Elias said, and his voice was light but his chest had gone tight. "She got the important part exactly right," Naomi said, and set the drawing on the fridge, where it joined the previous 9 months of Ren's archive of the family. There were, Elias counted, 14 drawings on the fridge, a progression. In the first, the three of them were a son, and a smaller son. In the fifth, they were stick figures holding hands. In the ninth, he was behind Naomi, smaller. In the 14th, today's, he was a phone. The son had become a rectangle. He wondered how many more drawings it would take before Ren stopped drawing him at all, before the rectangle became an absence, before the family portrait quietly became two. The letter had said, "before she stops drawing you into it at all," and the clinical precision of that phrase was its own kind of mercy. The mercy of being told the exact deadline of a thing you had been pretending had none. Elias waited until Ren was building a fort in the living room. Then he crouched beside her, casual, the way you crouch when you are investigating your own absence. "Hey Bug, that picture. Why is Daddy looking at his phone?" Ren did not look up from the blanket she was draping. "Because you always are." The word asterisk always did something to him, not because it was cruel, because it was a 7-year-old's plain observation, which is to say, the most reliable kind of truth. Was that today or just, in general? "In general," she said, and then, with the mercy children do not know they are dispensing, "But it's okay, Daddy. You're here now, you're helping with the fort." He was helping with the fort. And the letter had been right that the drawing would exist, and right that he would not have shown it to her, and right that she was already noticing. None of that proved a future self. It proved only that his daughter saw him clearly, which was its own kind of prophecy and its own kind of wound. That night he stood in front of the fridge for a long time. The drawing was third from the left. In the one beside it, from 3 months ago, he was holding Ren's hand. In the one beside that, from a year ago, he was lifting her onto his shoulders. The man in the pictures was leaving, not all at once, a few pixels per week. He traced the line of his own absent hand with a finger. Ren's drawings were honest in the way only children's art is honest, before they learn to flatter. In the earliest one, from when she was 4, he was a giant, lifting her above his head. In the middle ones, he was a figure at the edge of the frame, present but not central. In the latest, he was a profile, a phone, a silhouette. The arc was complete. The man in the pictures had not been erased by a villain. He had been erased by a calendar. By the next meeting. By the belief that providing was the same as being there, a belief his father had warned him against and he had nodded through, the way you nod through warnings you intend to ignore. The offer came on a Tuesday, which Elias found later almost funny, 9 days after the letter. Right on the letter's schedule. Priestley called him into the glass office on the 11th floor, the one with the view of the river that everyone at Halcyon pretended not to envy, and closed the door with the soft, authoritative click of a man who was about to change someone's life and expected gratitude. The 11th floor was where Halcyon kept the people who had stopped doing the work and started managing it. Elias had always thought of it as a promotion, the move from making to overseeing. Now, standing in the river light, he saw it as a removal, the editor taken out of the editing, the writer taken out of the writing, the person taken out of the person, left with a title and a view and the peculiar loneliness of being paid to be absent from the thing he loved. Priestley was happy here. Priestley was the proof the system worked. Elias looked at Priestley and felt, not envy, but the specific grief of a man who had nearly become the thing he was looking at. "We're launching a new imprint," Priestley said. "Literary but commercial. Think of it as the soul of the house with a P and L. I want you to run it. Editor-in-chief. New York, you'd relocate by spring. Title, money, the whole architecture of the thing. You've earned it, Elias. You've been the spine of this place for 6 years." Elias sat very still. The river moved behind Priestley's head like a slow gray animal. Thank you, that's a real honor. It's not an honor, it's a recognition, Priestley said, which was the kind of thing Priestley said. Sleep on it. Actually don't, we need an answer by Friday. Hartwell wants the org chart by end of week. When Elias got back to his desk, he opened the letter's second sheet again and read the part he had been avoiding. In 9 days, you will be offered the thing you have told yourself you wanted since you were 22. Take it, and you will become me. He had told himself he wanted it since he was 22. He had. He remembered the version of himself at 22 who wanted exactly this: the title, the city, the proof. That version had been so certain that the wanting was the same as the becoming. But the man at 37, sitting at a desk with a cold coffee and a daughter's drawing on the fridge, was no longer sure the 22-year-old had been a reliable narrator. He called Naomi at 5:30. They offered me something, New York, editor-in-chief of a new imprint. On the other end a beat, then, okay, how do you feel about it? I don't know how I feel about it. Do you want to go? He almost said yes. The yes was trained, it was his default, it was the answer the 22-year-old had pre-written. But the letter's voice was in his head now, steady and tired. Take it, and you will become me. I don't think I want to go, he heard himself say. I think I've been wanting to have wanted it. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said, carefully, then that's the most honest thing you've said to me in a year. He had not known she was keeping that tally. Of course she was keeping that tally. The letter had mentioned the promise, the one you made to Dad on his last clear afternoon, that you would keep the family together. You didn't. Not really. But you still can. Elias had not thought about that afternoon in a long time, and by not thought, he meant thought about it every day and refused to look at it directly. His father, Robert Brandt, had been a mechanic who read poetry on his lunch break and who had in the last year become a man who could not remember the poem he had just read. The cancer had been quick and slow at once, quick in the diagnosis, slow in the leaving. On the last afternoon Robert was lucid, he had asked Elias to drive him to the garage one more time, and Elias had, and they had stood in the grease and sawdust light of the place, and Robert had said, "Keep the family together, son. That's the only job that matters, the rest is just work." Elias had promised. He had meant it. And then life had done what life does, which was to make the promise feel like a thing you kept by not disturbing it, by staying, by providing, by being present in body while his attention went elsewhere, to the phone, to the career, to the next thing. He had kept the family together the way you keep a plant alive by not throwing it out. Which is to say, technically, but not in the spirit the dead man had meant. On Saturday, he drove to the garage. It was a different business now, a franchise, bright and franchised, but the bones of the place were there, the same oily concrete, the same light from the same high windows. He stood where his father had stood and felt, for the first time in years, the specific weight of the promise, not a burden, a direction. He called Naomi, "I'm at Dad's garage." "You went to the garage?" "Yeah. I didn't know you were thinking about him." "I'm always thinking about him," Elias said, and it was the second true thing he had said to her in a year, and he could feel the first one, "I don't think I want to go," standing behind it like a witness. There was a drawer in the desk. Elias had not opened it in 4 years. Inside were the pages of a novel he had started at 29, the year Wren was born, the year he had told himself he would write in the mornings and then had not, because mornings became bottles and then meetings and then a different life. The manuscript was titled in his own hurried hand, The Long, Quiet Asterisk. 211 pages, the last one ending mid-sentence, The Way Abandoned Things End. He read the first chapter. It was good. He was surprised to find it was good. He had remembered it as a child's ambition. It was, instead, the work of a person who had seen something true and almost caught it. It was the story of a man who inherits a bookstore and discovers, in the basement, that every book is a letter someone wrote and never sent, and that the bookstore itself is a kind of post office for the unsaid. He had forgotten he had written this. He had forgotten the tenderness in it, the way the protagonist listened to people, the way Elias no longer listened to anyone. There was a line, "We keep the unsent letters, because sending them would mean admitting we felt." And he set the page down because the page knew him better than the man who wrote it, or maybe the man who wrote it had known him before the life had sanded the knowing off. The letter had not mentioned the novel, but the letter had mentioned the man he had failed to become, and the novel was part of that man, the part that wrote instead of only edited, that made instead of only shaped other people's making. He read the letter's first sheet again that night, the part he had underlined without meaning to. You still have time to become the man I failed to become. He had read that line a dozen times, and each time it rearranged him slightly. It was not a threat. It was not even a request. It was a confession from a future he had not agreed to, handed back to him like a coat he had left at a party, with the pockets still full of who he used to be. He wrote that night for the first time in 4 years, not the novel, just a page, a description of the corner shop at 4:12, the barista's green apron, the way the steam came off the cup. It was bad. It was also the most alive he had felt since Ren was born. Naomi found the page on the desk in the morning. She read it. She said nothing, which was her way of saying, "I see you coming back." Then she made his coffee and set it by the page, and he understood that she had been waiting a long time for him to write something down. Elias had one friend from the years before Halcyon, a man named Theo Vance, who had been his roommate in the city at 24 and who had, around 30, simply stopped returning calls. Not with a fight. With the quiet evaporation of a person who had decided the friendship was a younger version of himself he had outgrown. The letter's second sheet had included, almost as a footnote, a line that had not made sense until now. Call Theo. He is not who you think he is, and neither are you. The silence between you is the shape of the thing you both avoided. He remembers the night you don't. Elias had no memory of a particular night with Theo that he avoided, which, he realized, was exactly the problem. He had gaps where other people had stories. Which was strange because he and Theo had had many nights, the kind that should leave marks. The night they had split a pizza and planned a road trip that never happened. The night Theo had his heart broken by a woman named Prue and Elias had driven across the city at midnight with no license and no fear. The night they had sworn, drunk and solemn, that they would be the friends who stayed. He remembered all of those. The one he did not remember was the one Theo remembered best, which is the rule of friendship. The wound is always on the side of the one who waited, and the one who left feels only a vague lightening, the relief of a weight set down, never suspecting the weight landed on someone. He found Theo's number in an old email, unchanged in 9 years, and texted, "It's Elias. I think I owe you a conversation we never had. Coffee." The reply came in 11 seconds, which told Elias everything. Theo had been waiting by the phone for 9 years, or at least had not deleted the number, which in a friendship is the same as waiting. Tuesday, the place with the bad espresso and the good light. 4:12 if you can make it. Elias stared at the time. 4:12, the letter's hour. He did not believe in coincidences anymore, and he was no longer sure he had ever believed in them, only pretended to, the way you pretend not to believe in the thing that is already rearranging your life. They met. Theo was heavier and calmer and wore a wedding ring Elias had never seen go on. They talked around the night for an hour, and then Theo said it plainly. "The night your dad died, you called me at 3 a.m. You were at the hospital. You said you couldn't do it alone, and I said I'd come, and then I didn't. I froze. I told myself you didn't need me. That's the lie I've been living in. I'm sorry, Elias, I should have been there." Elias searched his memory. The call, the hospital, the empty chair. He had buried the chair. The letter had been right again. There was a night he didn't remember, because remembering it meant remembering that the person he had relied on had not come, and that he had, afterward, quietly erased Theo rather than carry the disappointment. "I forgot you didn't come," Elias said, "and it was not a forgiveness, and it was not a forgiveness. I just stopped calling." "Yeah," Theo said, "I noticed when it got quiet." Naomi, finally, asked to see the letter. It was the natural threshold. He had told her a version, a strange letter, a private thing, and she had honored the vagueness the way a good spouse honors a closed door without rattling the knob. But 11 days of doors closed at 1 a.m., of him at the desk with the lamp on and the look of a man reading a verdict, had worn her patience into something that was still love but was no longer silent. She asked the way she asked most things, directly, without drama, as if the answer were a fact she had a right to, which, he was beginning to see, she did. It was Sunday. Wren was at a birthday party, the kind with too much sugar and a rented mascot, and the apartment was briefly and strangely empty, and Naomi sat across from him at the desk and said, "Show me." He showed her. He watched her read the first sheet, then the second, and he watched the skepticism move across her face the way weather moves across a field, arriving, then breaking, then settling into something that was not quite belief but was not disbelief either. "The scar thing," she said, "that's real. You did tell me it was a dog." "I know." "Why a dog?" "I don't know, it was easier. A dog bite is a story. A bike accident at 11 where I cried for an hour is, I don't know, a thing." "Who would know that, Elias?" "I don't know who," he said, "but the letter knew Wren's drawing before it happened. It knew the coffee before I ordered it. It knew the offer before Priestley opened his mouth. I'm not saying it's me from the future. I'm saying it knows me better than anyone has a right to." She was quiet a long time. Then she reached across the desk and took his hand, the one not holding the letter, and said the thing that undid him. "Whoever wrote this, future you, prankster, guardian angel, I don't care, they're asking you to come back. I've been asking you too. I just wasn't loud enough." He had not cried in front of her in years. He cried now, a little the undramatic kind, the kind that just arrives and leaves. She did not make a thing of it. She squeezed his hand and went to start the laundry, which was her own kind of grace. That afternoon, in the attic, looking for a box of Wren's outgrown clothes, he found his father's notebook. Robert Brandt had kept one, a mechanic's ledger, part invoices, part observations. On the last filled page, dated the week before he died, was a line Elias had never seen. "Elias will keep them together by leaving. That's the mistake I made too. Tell him if you can. I won't be able to." His father had known the shape of the trap, and had not been able to say it out loud, only write it down and trust the attic to keep it until the right hands found it. He became, against his nature, a man of investigation. The letter's paper bothered him. Cream stock, heavy, with a faint decal edge, the kind of paper that is made, not manufactured. He took a sample to a stationer in the old quarter, a woman who had been selling paper since before the internet, and she turned it over in her hands the way a sommelier turns a glass. "This," she said, "is a cotton rag stock, hand-pressed. The mill that makes this, if it still exists, is in the north. Small. They supply maybe 200 accounts. Does it exist now? Could I buy this today?" She looked at him over her glasses. "This exact batch? No, the watermark's wrong for anything currently in production. This is a future run, or a very good fake of one." A future run. Elias did not sleep Sunday night, but it was the good kind of not sleeping, the kind where the mind is a room with the windows open. He was not afraid of the letter anymore. He was afraid of wasting the information it had given him, which was a different and healthier fear, the fear of a man standing at the edge of a life he might still choose. He wrote another page of the novel, then another. By Monday he had 11 pages, and they were not bad, and Naomi had taken to leaving the coffee by the desk without comment, which he understood as her saying, "I am proud of you, and I will not make it heavy." The promotion offer sat in his inbox like a detained ship. Friday was the deadline. He had 4 days to decide whether to become the man in the letter, or the man the letter was begging him to become instead. He had, in the years since 22, built an entire identity around being the person who would one day be offered this. It was the shape of his ambition. He had poured the abandoned novel into it, the way you pour one dream into another when the first will not hold. The letter had exposed the substitution. The promotion was not the dream. The promotion was the excuse, the respectable, well-paid, socially approved reason to do the leaving he had been trained to do. Refusing it was not refusing success. It was refusing to call the leaving success. That distinction, the letter had shown him, was the whole of the matter. He had, in the years since 22, built an entire identity around being the person who would one day be offered this. It was the shape of his ambition. He had poured the abandoned novel into it, the way you pour one dream into another when the first will not hold. The letter had exposed the substitution. The promotion was not the dream. The promotion was the excuse, the respectable, well-paid, socially approved reason to do the leaving he had been trained to do. Refusing it was not refusing success. It was refusing to call the leaving success. That distinction, the letter had shown him, was the whole of the matter. He declined the promotion on Thursday, one day early, by email, and then by phone, because Priestley deserved a voice and not just a sentence. The email was 3 lines. He wrote it, deleted it, wrote it again, and the second version was shorter because the first had contained a justification, and the letter had taught him that the life did not owe anyone a justification for staying in the room. I am declining the New York role. I am needed here, and here is where I am. Thank you. Priestley called within minutes, which told Elias that the man did not sleep either, or did not sleep through the loss of a reliable spine. The phone call was the harder part, because Priestley's voice was the voice of the system that had named him valuable, and part of Elias still wanted to be named valuable by it. I'm not the right person for New York, Elias said. I'm the right person for this city, this desk, this life. I'm sorry. It's the honor you said it wasn't, and I'm turning it down. Priestley was silent in the way executives are silent when a predictable asset behaves unpredictably. You'll regret this, Elias. Offers like this don't circle back. Maybe, Elias said. But the other version of me, the one who took it, he regretted it more. I have it on good authority. He hung up before Priestley could ask what that meant. That night, for the first time in the 11 days since the letter arrived, he slept. Not through, but he slept. And in the sleep, a dream he would not remember except for one image. His father at the garage, holding out a wrench, saying keep the family together by staying in the room, son. That's the trick. Stay in the room. When he woke, Naomi was already up, and on the desk, beside the letter, was a cup of coffee she had made exactly the way he liked it, and a note, "You stayed in the room last night. I noticed." He read the note 6 times. Then he went and found her in the kitchen and hugged her, and she let him, and Wren wandered in still half asleep and said, "Why is Daddy hugging Mama?" And Naomi said, "Because he's here." And Wren said, "Okay," and went back to bed, which was the most generous review a marriage could get. He went back to the corner shop on Friday deliberately at 4:12 and asked the barista, her name was June, about the cup. "I need to know how you knew my drink before I ordered it." June wiped the counter. She was not surprised by the question. That, more than anything, convinced him. "I don't know how I knew," she said. "For 3 days before it happened, I kept dreaming about a man in a green coat, no, your coat, the gray one, and a flat white, extra hot, no sugar. I'd wake up and write it on a sticky note. On Wednesday, I just made it before you came in. It felt like I was supposed to." "Dreams," Elias said. "Dreams," she agreed. "I know how it sounds. My roommate thinks I'm losing it. But the note I wrote said, give it to the sad man who needs it. You were the only sad man who came in at 4:12. He asked if he could see the note. She showed him a battered pad by the register. The top sticky read, in June's round hand, 4:12, flat white, extra hot, no sugar, the sad man. Say, you look like you need it. Below it, in a different ink fainter, were the words. Tell him to read the rest. The second handwriting was his. Elias knew it the way you know your own reflection in a dark window, not by the features, by the familiarity. "You didn't write that bottom part," he said. "I didn't," June said. "It was there when I tore the note off the pad. I thought I'd written it in a trance or something. I almost threw it away." He left the shop with the sticky note in his pocket, and a question he could not yet form. If the letter came from him in 20 years, how did June get a note in her own handwriting that he had written? Unless the letter did not travel through time the way a postcard does. Unless it traveled the way a memory does, arriving not in a mailbox, but in the people who were paying attention. June had dreamed him. Wren had drawn him. Theo had waited for him. His mother had fallen silent in the exact key he would have heard if he had been listening. Naomi had asked him to come back in 100 small ways he had filed under asterisk fine. The letter had not created any of these. It had only been the noise that made him stop and hear the music that was already playing. A memory travels that way, not from the future, but from the part of the present that knows and has been politely ignored. The letter had refused to name the third prediction. You are not ready, and readiness is part of the test. But readiness, Elias was learning, was not a state you achieved. It was a door you walked through while still afraid. The first sign of the third thing came as a silence. His mother, who lived 3 states away and who had, since Robert's death, become a diligent sender of unsolicited advice and church bulletins, stopped calling. 3 days passed with no voicemail. For most sons, this would be relief. For Elias, who knew his mother's rhythm the way he knew his own breathing, it was a skipped beat. He called, no answer. He called his brother Marcus, who lived closer to her. Marcus said she was fine, just tired, in the tone of a man who had been told to say exactly that. Elias booked a train for Saturday. Naomi packed for him without being asked, and when he objected that he'd only be gone a night, she said, "Take 2. Your mother raised you to stay longer than 1 night, and you've been forgetting that about yourself." Another instruction from the letter's family: stay in the room. On the train, he opened the letter once more and read the lines around the third prediction, looking for what he had missed. The third is the one that matters. In 9 days, you will be offered the thing you have told yourself you wanted since you were 22. Take it, and you will become me. The 9 days had been the promotion. He had passed that test by refusing, but the letter had called the promotion the *3 asterisk, and the promotion had been the *2 prediction in the list, wrong cup, drawing promotion. So what was the third? Unless the letter had not numbered them the way he had. Unless the *3 was not the promotion, but the thing the promotion was a stand-in for, the larger pattern of leaving, of becoming the man who leaves. His mother, Helen, was not fine. She was tired in the way that preceded a diagnosis, and the diagnosis, when it came 2 weeks later, was the kind that reorganizes a family's weather. Early stage, treatable but real, and arrived at late because she had not wanted to worry anyone, which is the particular selfishness of the Stoic, a selfishness Elias recognized because it was his own. The particular tiredness of the Stoic is a language with no word for help. Helen had spent 60 years translating every need into a chore someone else could do, and so her illness had announced itself not as a cry but as a silence, and the silence had nearly been fatal and would have been, Elias saw, if the letter had not taught him to listen for the absences. He sat with her through the first appointment and held the intake form the way you hold a map of a country you have been avoiding. And he wrote down the words the doctor said, as if writing them could keep them from being true, and then he understood that writing them down was exactly what kept them from being alone. He stayed the 2 nights Naomi had packed for, and then 3 more, and he sat with his mother in the pale hospital light and listened to her talk about Robert, about the garage, about the younger Elias who had wanted to write, and she said, "Your father always said you'd trade the writing for the proving. He was right, wasn't he?" "I traded it," Elias said. "I'm trading it back." "Good," Helen said, and fell asleep holding his hand, and he did not take his hand away, because the letter had taught him that the hand left in the room is the whole point. Marcus came by on the 3rd day and found them like that and looked, briefly, like a man who realized he had been the one who left, and Elias saw in his brother's face the same trap, the same architecture of absence, and he understood that the letter was not only for him. It was for anyone who had ever confused providing with presence. He called Naomi from the hallway. "She's going to be okay, slow but okay." "Good," Naomi said, "and you, are you okay?" "I'm in the room," he said. "I think that's the answer to both questions." On the train home, Elias understood the shape of the letter at last, or the shape he needed it to have. The 3 predictions were not random. They were a sequence about leaving. The wrong cup, a stranger had known him and reached across the distance. Lesson, you are seen, even when you hide. The drawing, his daughter had drawn his absence. Lesson, you are watched, even when you think no one notices. The promotion, he had been offered the perfect excuse to leave and had almost taken it. Lesson, the trap is not the leaving. The trap is calling the leaving success. And beneath all 3, the core sentence, which he now saw was not a warning but a definition. You still have time to become the man I failed to become. The future self was not threatening him. The future self was mourning the version of Elias who had been traded away for the proof, the title, the relocation, the quiet erasure of the novel and the garage and the hand in the room. And the future self, having failed, had reached back with the only tool left to a person who has already made the mistake: a letter, a confession, a rope. Elias wrote in the novel that night, a scene where a man receives a letter from his future self and realizes the letter is not from the future at all, but from the self he abandoned in the present, the self who never stopped waiting by the phone. He did not know yet if that was true, but it was a true thing to write, and the writing was the point. He came home to an apartment that looked exactly the same and felt entirely different. The way a room feels different after you have decided to stay in it. The difference was him. The walls had not moved. The fridge still held 14 drawings, now 15. The desk still held the lamp and the envelope, and now, pages of a novel that were no longer abandoned. But he moved through the rooms as a person moves through a place he has decided to inhabit rather than merely occupy. Occupation is what you do when you are waiting to leave. Inhabitance is what you do when you have, at last, arrived. The letter had not given him a new apartment. It had given him a new verb. Ren ran to the door, actually ran, not wandered, and threw herself at his legs, and said you were gone forever in the way 7-year-olds say forever, which is to say, accurately for them. He picked her up, which he had stopped doing as often as he should, and she smelled of crayons and apples and the specific gravity of being loved. Naomi was behind her, and she was smiling the real smile, the one from the drawing she had not yet drawn, and Elias understood that the future the letter warned him about was not a place he would arrive at in 20 years. It was a place he was arriving at right now, one stayed-in room at a time. That night, at the desk, he did the thing he had been avoiding. He laid the 2 sheets of the letter side by side with the page of the novel he had written on the train, and he read all 3 as if they were one document. The letter said, "I am you, Elias. I am writing this on a Tuesday, 20 years from the night you are reading it." The novel said, he realized the letter was not from the future at all, but from the self he abandoned in the present, the self who never stopped waiting by the phone. The handwriting on both was his, the fear on both was his, the mercy on both was his. He set the pen down, the desk was the same desk. The lamp was his father's lamp. The coffee was cold, the envelope was cream. And the man at the desk was, for the first time in years, in the room with all of it, not observing his life from the phone screen distance, but standing inside it, the way you stand inside a house during a storm because the house is where you are. The letter had not changed his circumstances. It had changed his location relative to them. He had moved from the window to the floor. He wrote, at the bottom of the letter's second sheet, in his own hand, a line he had not planned. "I think you're not from 20 years ahead. I think you're from right now, from the part of me that didn't take the promotion, didn't leave the room, didn't forget Theo, didn't stop writing. You're not my future. You're my present, finally loud enough to hear." He did not know if it was true. But writing, it made the envelope feel lighter, as if the future it claimed to carry had been his own weight all along. Theo came over the following Tuesday, 4:12, naturally, because the hour now belonged to all of them. They sat at the desk, the same desk where the letter had arrived, and Elias showed him the pages. Theo read the novel scene about the man who receives the letter. He read the letter. He read Elias' edition. Then he said the thing that turned the whole story a quarter turn. "This isn't time travel," Theo said. "I mean, maybe it is, I'm not the person to ask. But look at what it did. It made you call me. It made June make your coffee. It made your daughter draw the truth. It made your mother get seen. A letter can't do any of that unless the letter is already in the people. The letter just woke them up to it." Elias had not thought of it that way. The letter had not created the connections. It had revealed them. June had been dreaming of a sad man. Ren had been drawing an absent father. Theo had been waiting by a phone he'd abandoned. Helen had been quietly ill. Naomi had been quietly asking him to come back. All of it was already true. The letter had only been a lens, focusing the light that was already there. "So whoever wrote it," Elias said slowly, "wrote it from inside the life I'm already living, not from 20 years out, from the part of now that knows better." "Or," Theo said, "from the part of you that's been trying to tell you for 11 years and finally found a voice that you'd listen to. The scar, the dog, the promise, those are your secrets. Only you could write a letter that knows them. Future you, present you, same guy, the guy who finally answered." There is a particular morning that comes to a person who has been rearranged. Not dramatic, not lit by revelation, but ordinary and complete, the way a fever breaks and you simply notice you are not hot anymore. It came on a Wednesday. Elias made Naomi's coffee without being asked, learned her drink the way she had learned his, and set it by her side of the bed, and she woke and saw it and said, with no performance at all, "You remembered how I take it." "I remembered," he said. Ren was late for school because he read her 2 chapters of a book he was making up, a book about a girl who drew her father into every picture because he was always there. And Ren said, "Daddy, that's not a real book," and he said, "It is today." And she went to school late but lit, and the lateness did not matter, because the being there did. At the desk, he finished the scene. Then he began the next. Then he began to suspect he was not writing a novel so much as writing himself back into the present tense, one sentence at a time. He opened the envelope one final time, the cream paper, the hand that was his, the words, "You still have time to become the man I failed to become." He read it now and did not feel warned. He felt accompanied. The failed man in the letter was not a ghost from ahead. He was the shadow he had been casting all along, and a shadow only exists because there is a body standing in the light. The body was him. The light was now. The time was this. It was the final week of the story, and Elias did the one thing the letter had not told him to do. He took it to a forensic document examiner. Not because he doubted it anymore, because he wanted to know, with the part of his mind that dealt in facts, what the facts would say. The examiner, a precise woman named Dr. Osa, who had testified in more forgery trials than she could count, examined the paper, the ink, the fold, the handwriting, for 2 days, and then she told him something that rearranged everything a second time. "The handwriting is yours," she said. "Not a match to your current hand, a match to your hand as it will be. The pressure, the lean, the way the cross of the T in Brandt sits slightly left of center, that's a developed hand, an older hand, a hand that has written a great deal more than you have. Could someone forge that? To forge a hand this accurately, they would have to be you, with 20 more years of practice. The ink is a cotton rag formula that won't be commercially available for at least a decade. I checked the patents. The paper is a future batch from a mill that hasn't tooled up for it yet. The fold crease shows it was opened and refolded by the same hand that wrote it, then sealed, then delivered to your address, which it was. The postmark is real, the delivery scan is real, and the sender line reads, in full, "Return to sender, E. Brandt, C.O. the man who will finally read it." Elias sat with all of it, the paper from the future, the ink from the future, the hand from the future. The sender line that was a riddle and a confession at once. And then Dr. Osai said the line that was the actual twist, the one no prediction had prepared him for. Her voice did not change when she said it. That was what made it true. Forensic examiners are trained to deliver facts the way the facts arrive, without crescendo. "Mr. Brandt, asterisk," she said, "I've examined 4 letters like this in my career, all to men around your age, all containing a sentence about becoming the man someone failed to become, all written in the recipient's own future hand." She set the report down. In every case, the recipient made a different choice afterward. In every case, the letter was posted, by the recipient, decades later back to themselves, on the day they finally understood. The loop closes. The man who writes it is the man who received it. You are corresponding with the version of you who stayed. "Mr. Brandt, I've examined 4 letters like this in my career, all to men around your age, all containing a sentence about becoming the man someone failed to become, all written in the recipient's own future hand. In every case, the recipient made a different choice afterward. In every case, the letter was posted, by the recipient, decades later back to themselves, on the day they finally understood. The loop closes. The man who writes it is the man who received it. You are corresponding with the version of you who stayed." Elias understood then the true shape of it. The letter was not a warning from a stranger. It was a promise he would keep to himself. The older Elias who wrote it was the Elias who had, in this very week, decided to stay, and who, 40 years from now, would sit at a desk with a cream envelope and a hand gone steady from a life lived in the room, and would write back to the man he had been, because the man he had been had, at last, become worth writing to. The future was not threatening him. The future was thanking him. And the thanks arrived in the form of a letter, because some messages can only be delivered by the person you become to the person you were. Elias did not throw the letter away. He did not frame it. He did the ordinary thing, which was the right thing. He slid it into the drawer with the novel, where the two documents could keep each other company, the warning and the answer, the question and the life. He did the ordinary thing, which was the right thing. The extraordinary response, the framing, the obsession, the turning of a private mercy into a public relic, would have been its own kind of leaving, a leaving of the present for the mystery. He chose instead to let the letter become what it had always been, a note from one Elias to another, filed where the novel lived, in the drawer of the desk his father had lamped, in the room he had decided to stay inside. Some messages you keep not by displaying them, but by living them, the way you keep a promise not by framing the vow, but by keeping it, one unremarkable Tuesday at a time. A year passed in the way years pass for a man who stays in the room, not in a straight line, but in an accumulation of small presences. He finished the long quiet, all of it this time, the last sentence written, not abandoned. Naomi read it first on a Sunday and cried in the way she cried at things that were true and said, "This is the man I married." And he understood she meant the man he was becoming, not the one he had been. Wren kept drawing the family. In the new drawings, Elias was holding her hand. In the newest, he was reading a book aloud, and his phone was on the floor, face down, which Wren informed him was the best part. Theo became a regular presence, the kind of friend who fills the silences instead of causing them. They met most Tuesdays at 4:12 and never explained the hour to anyone, which is how you keep a sacred thing sacred. His mother's health steadied. Marcus came back into the orbit, slowly, the way a planet returns when the gravity is finally honest. And on a Tuesday 20 years later, no, on a Tuesday in the ordinary stretch of Tuesdays, Elias Brandt, now gray at the temples and steady in the hand, sat at a desk very like the first one, with a cream envelope and a pen, and wrote a letter to a younger man he remembered only as a collection of near misses. He wrote the scar, he wrote the dog, he wrote the promise to Robert, he wrote the promotion he had refused, he wrote the drawing and June and Theo and the hospital light and the hand he had not taken away. And then he wrote the line that was the true center of everything, the line that had started this whole correspondence and would now close it. "You still have time to become the man I failed to become." He addressed it, in his own hand, to the man he had been, and he wrote on the front the words the first envelope had taught him. "Open only when you cannot sleep." And he posted it not to a mailbox, but into the current of the life he had chosen, trusting that the right hands on the right sleepless night would find it, the way he had. Because that is the only magic there is. Not a letter from tomorrow. A letter from the self you decide to become, sent backward through every small choice to reach the self you were, with one message, the only one that ever mattered. You are not too late, you are only ever one room away from the life. Stay in it. The rest is details. At the end, if you are reading this and you have an envelope you have not opened, not the paper kind, the kind written in the small regrets you keep calling later, know that it is from you to you, and it is only ever addressed * to me. Open it, not tomorrow. The tomorrow you are waiting for is the same Tuesday in a different shirt. The letter you need was always in your own hand. The only question the future ever asks is the one Elias answered at 1:14 in the morning, coffee gone cold, envelope open, hands steady at last. Are you ready to be the version of you that stays?